Man, I'm tired. I need a vacation. I have so much to do. There's not enough hours in the day. I don't have time to take a break. Now I have to do that too. Sound familiar? We hear everybody talk about burnout and work-life balance. But it's rare we actually talk about your mental health while we do it. This is the podcast for you if you're a solopreneur, side hustler, novice, or seasoned business owner, someone who suffers from Superwoman syndrome, or a combination of the above. It's time we get real and talk about the reality of what it's like to feel on paper that you've got it all together, but when the cameras stop rolling, you're riding the hot mess express. So grab a glass of wine and wind down as we whine about how we can go from burned out to bossed up. This is officially the re-release of From Burned Out to Bossed Up. Originally, we talked about solopreneurs and systems. But the longer I began researching productivity, systems and operations, time management, prioritization, I realized that the problem wasn't how people work, it's how they think. We spend a lot of time telling other people how to be motivated, how to get more done in a day, and even how to be better at the task that they have. But the problem isn't proficiency. It's not even productivity half the time. It's your purpose. It's the why behind the what. And that's what no one is addressing. The more I listened to my old podcast episodes, I started feeling like I was reporting on only half the equation. Overworking is a societal issue, but it doesn't just come from society's influence. It's a result of having the constant desire to prove that your strength, your dedication, and ultimately your worth is what makes you valuable as a person. That's how Superwoman syndrome sets in. And before we keep going, for those of you not familiar with Superwoman syndrome, it's this. Superwoman syndrome is a term that describes a woman who tries to do everything to perfection, which can lead to burnout, stress, and an unhealthy obsession with perfection. The term was first coined in 1984 and can refer to a woman who balances many roles such as a mother, a wife, employee, and homemaker. In other words, it's a woman who feels like she has to be everything to everybody all the time and do it well. Originally, when I released this podcast, I only talked about burnout and productivity, thinking that the way we operate as a society and what we've been taught was the problem. It wasn't until I realized that many of us, myself included, and especially women, feel this desire to be perfect and accomplish everything, even to our detriment, because our mindset has been programmed that way, especially if you are talking about entrepreneurship. When we talk about entrepreneurs, the number one thing you hear about is being willing to put in a huge amount of effort to make it work. Laziness is the contributing factor to failed businesses. Lack of respect for the hustle and grind to achieve results is the problem. No one is talking about the fact that hard work isn't the only factor that leads to success. So regardless of whether I'm talking about business or prioritizing self-care, that much in 3 years from when I started this podcast hasn't changed. Check out this clip from the original first episode. If working hard was the only metric required for success, why aren't more of us successful? Well, it's because working hard isn't the only way to success. It really is about being strategic and working smarter for what you do and making what you do actually count. So one of the first things I want us to talk about from the standpoint of what success is and what it takes is erasing the mindset that you solely need to work hard in order to achieve what it is you're looking to achieve. The amount of effort someone puts in isn't a determining factor in whether or not they're going to succeed. This is one of the main reasons why I continue to be a major advocate of work smarter, not harder. Superwoman syndrome ends up being the result of so many years of being programmed to believe that the harder you work, the better results you're going to get, without considering that working hard at the wrong things are only going to get you the wrong results. And then when you don't get the results you want, what ends up happening? You work even harder thinking you didn't do enough the first time around, ignoring the signs of whether you are pushing yourself beyond your mental and physical limits. Then, if you're fortunate enough to have something work, you might mistake hard work as the reason instead of having the right strategy or being clear about what you want. So you continue working hard instead of working smart. It's a vicious cycle. So rather than teaching people to focus on fewer things to master them, we consistently preach that you should opt to do more instead. And the more you work, the more it leads to burnout. You would think because of this, you're more likely to prioritize mental health, but hustle culture preaches the opposite. We're taught to just push through instead. You could push through when you're tired, when you're exhausted, when you're sick, when you're not feeling like you're at your very best. You could continue to push through. Or you could learn to listen to your body, to your mind, your overall sense of well-being, and learn when it's time to stop what you're doing. When I originally said this about pushing through in 2021, I was only talking about entrepreneurship. But honestly, this applies to anyone because self-care is for everyone. It's also worth mentioning that in the fall of 2021, when I made the original first episode of my podcast, I didn't recognize that Superwoman Syndrome was the driving force behind why I felt the need to push through. I only recognized the importance of self-care and that I needed to incorporate it. Once I recognized what Superwoman Syndrome was and its impacts, most people would probably expect that I felt a sense of relief that explained why I felt the need to work so hard. But in truth, it honestly just made me angry. I subscribed to quote-unquote playing by the rules for so long and felt like it was ultimately a waste of my time. And going back to listen to the first episode again in preparation of this re-release, past me also seems to agree. Playing by the rules got me absolutely nowhere. At least not the rules that I had always been taught growing up. And this actually started back from K through 12. So I was taught to get good grades so I can go to college and so I could get a good internship and do extracurriculars. And all of that was supposed to lead up to a great job, which, I'm sure that was the case for a lot of people maybe 20 to 25 years ago. But that simply wasn't the case. And if we're being 100% honest, I did not have a decent job for nearly 3 years after I graduated from my undergrad. And it wasn't for, I didn't have good enough grades or I didn't have good enough experience. The market was just not good during a recession. I found myself working 3 jobs as a server at a barbecue restaurant, a substitute teacher, and a retail associate at the same time, just trying to make ends meet. And initially, I felt frustrated because I was like, I did everything right. Why is this happening to me? I should have achieved X and Y and Z. And the truth is, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would have done a lot of the same things, but I would have played by a different set of rules. Now, in my defense, a large part of why I felt like I had to do everything right was because, unlike a lot of my peers, I didn't have access to a large network, a bunch of resources, or connections, and I thought that I could do all of this on my own because I was taught to believe that all you needed was hard work. I'm still actively unlearning that concept at 36 years old. One of the biggest lessons that I unfortunately had to learn the hard way was that working hard was not just a piece of the equation, but you also needed to know the right set of rules to play by. Superwoman Syndrome only taught me to work hard. It didn't account for communicating with people in a way that didn't lead to burnout. And again, I explained this in the first episode about what I learned with office politics and how it impacted me down to how this ultimately led to repeated spells of burnout. The part that I found was not really communicated all that well was the idea of office politics, the unwritten rules, the idea of seniority as opposed to the qualifications needed for the job. Those ideas I actually found to be more impactful in terms of your career than the idea of how hard you worked. And the unfortunate part about that is it took me a very long time to realize that. And by that point, I was starting to experience burnout. It was the idea that was put in my head from a very early age that how hard you worked directly correlated to how good you were at something. and how worthy you were of something. I thought because I worked hard and I knew that I was dedicated to making sure we got the best results possible, that my career was honestly going to be a breeze for me in terms of advancement and success. And when I tell you that while I was able to do some amazing things, my growth was honestly a lot slower than it should have been. When you work for nearly a decade in 7 different industries, doing a variety of different jobs, whether it's as an event planner, an association manager, a retail associate, a logistics coordinator, the list goes on and on and on. One of the things I did recognize is that my best work experiences were from the jobs and the employers that had the best systems in place. And that's what led me to talking about systems. The best experiences I had in my career were from the places that ran their businesses like well-oiled machines. Now here we are, 3 years later, and I've come to the conclusion that a person is less likely to experience burnout with not only the right systems, but the right mindset. It was the mindset of being knee-deep in Superwoman syndrome and unknowingly participating in these environments that threatened to further deteriorate my mental health if I didn't make a change. And that's why I decided to reformat this podcast, because it's not just about systems, it's about self-care. And it's about making a lifestyle change that ultimately will fit the narrative of what you want your life to be, not everyone else. If you enjoyed this podcast, I encourage you to check out my website, simplystellarsolutions.com, to learn more about what I do and how I can help you redesign a life that you can feel good about. Whether it's an event, a business strategy, or just making things more streamlined, you've come to the right place. Until next time.